We're doing this with the baby boomers retiring. We're doing this with Gen Z, the young kids coming in. And boomers were the largest generation we've ever had. Gen Z is our smallest one ever. So we already have a shortage of 400,000 workers a year in a time that we need to double the industrial plant. This is going to be rough. But on the backside of this, we'll have a more stable supply chain system that is largely within North America and is subject to North America things. That's not going to trigger a global trend. That's going to remove the United States from really caring at all about how foreign supply chains work. And that's going to leave us to other countries to either pick up the pieces or shrivel.
We are not letting Russia back into the community of nations. I think that's no matter what you think of that policy, which means gas is going to be $3.50 and higher a gallon for probably the next decade.
So we're going to have shortages in a number of products because of what the Russians are, because the Russian stuff is being removed from the system.
Right.
Former Soviet commodities being dumped on the global market since 1992 are one of the two biggest reasons why inflation has been so low for the last 30 years. And that's completely going away. So the oil situation is obviously huge. Natural gas for the Europeans and for fertilizer markets is huge. Fertilizer markets in general is a nightmare. We're losing 70% of the world's neon. That means we get to decide later this year what doesn't get a semiconductor because we can't make as many. On the gasoline question specifically, however, the US president has the authority from the 2015 budget bill to summarily bar oil exports. So what's going on with our oil markets right now is we export several million barrels a day of high quality shale crude that's light and sweet and broadly easy to refine. And we import a similar amount of heavy sludge, primarily from Canada, but not exclusively, that only the United States has the refineries that are sophisticated enough to turn into high-end product. And then we export some of that product as well. If Biden were to reinstitute the oil ban, all the shale crude would be locked up in the United States. You'd have catastrophic energy prices globally, but you'd have rock bottom energy prices within the United States. Right. And we would have to go through a blitz of refining capacity expansion, because while Biden can bar exports of crude, he can't bar exports of any other energy product, including gasoline and diesel. So I can see an environment where the refiners bitch and moan and scream for a couple of years until they've built out like 4 or 5 million barrels a day of new capacity. And then all of a sudden they're like the fattest cats in the land because they have imported crude, they have local crude, they have different blends that can turn into different products. And every single one of them is exportable to an energy market globally that is sky high. That is how you make $1 billion these years.
Like if I had access to capital, I'd build two things. I'd build an oil refinery and I'd build a nuclear reactor. Now, the problem is that the regulatory and ideological environment against both of those things nearly make it impossible. And I completely agree with you on the export ban.
We're fine, but we have doubled the capacity of the ones we have. Every refinery by definition has a lot of standoff space because when you work with petrochemicals, you don't want to be close to a housing unit. So we have seen, especially in Texas, significant build outs, and I can see new fractionating and distillation units being built at every single facility that can tap the shale market. That is largely Texas. And let me add something to your investment target, a fertilizer plant.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Because we're looking at least a 3-year shortage of everything.
Yeah. Well, let's go into some of the other shortages. Since you have such deep knowledge on this, I think I try to spell it out for people: gas, food, because these are the basics of the American bedrock. But it skyrockets everything. Like you said, neon, you can't make semiconductors. That means you can't buy a new car. That means you can't buy, several types.
Well, you can buy an analog car.
That's true. Yeah, right. But no one's getting the 2023 Tesla anytime soon. It's going to be my prediction. So where else do you see some of the big shortages that can have macro political shifts?
Oh God, there's so many. Let's start with cell phones. The two ecosystems for cell phones are either Korea-based or China-based Korea-based with Android, China-based with Apple. Apple has put 90% of its sourcing in the PRC. And every time that something has happened that has made them, maybe think twice about that, they've decided to double down. So they are the most exposed company in the world to the China collapse. So if you don't get the next iPhone, you're probably not going to have an iPhone for several years. Korea is a little bit better, but they have a system that is sourced throughout the East Asian Rim. They are also China dependent, not to the same degree, but Korea is one of those fast aging countries, arguably one of the top 3 fastest aging in the world. It's unclear how long they can maintain that system without the Americans helping, and it's not clear that the Americans want to. steel's an issue. The Russians are the world's largest exporter of pig iron. Now, Russia plus Ukraine are the largest. Some countries, most countries, your Indias, your Chinas, your Frances, your Germanys, they do all of it in their own country. So they import the iron ore, they turn it into an intermediate product in a blast furnace, then they finally refine it into more advanced products. It's all there. They see it as a national security issue. The United States is the world's best steel recycler. So almost 99% of the steel that we use goes through a second, third, fourth, fifth, and 17th use. But whenever we need something to be pretty, like cladding on an appliance or roof work, or anything you see on the outside of a building, anything that's visible, you need virgin steel for that generally. And so we don't smelt iron ore. Hardly at all. We buy pig iron off the international market and then use it to make the pretty stuff. 2/3 of our supply comes from Russia and Ukraine. So that's one where the rest of the world is, I don't want to say okay, but they can deal, whereas we're probably going to have a problem. We're going to have some ugly bills. And there's no way around that until you build a new steel facility, which we haven't done in quite some time. There's an argument that a lot of this is coming back. It will. But again, you don't build that industrial plant overnight. The one I'm most concerned about is fertilizer. Belarus plus Ukraine plus Russia is 40% of global phosphate. It takes 10 years to bring a phosphate mine online. The natural gas prices in Europe have gotten so high, they're not even making nitrogen fertilizer. We're expanding that here, but that takes 3 years. And then phosphate, we used to get the bulk of internationally traded phosphate from the Chinese, but the Chinese are having food security issues, and so they've banned all export. So we're looking at a breakdown in the supply system for all three fertilizers at the same time, and we should not expect it to get better in the next 2 years. So we're already seeing in more advanced countries a degree of crop switching, less corn, less soy, more hay, for crops that are less fertilizer intensive. And in poorer countries, whether it's South Asia or Sub-Saharan Africa, we're seeing countries just not use much fertilizer. Now, we don't know how bad this is going to be until we get some harvest forecasts. We'll probably get that around September. But we're looking at the worst global harvest year in years. And that is going to generate the start of a multi-year famine. There is no way to avoid it at this point. The war could end tomorrow, and it's already too late for this season. Our political system is in one of its periods of generational reset, when the factions move around, and every party for most of their duration has like one faction who's kind of first among equals, if you will. In the Republican Party, that was the business community for a long time, but Trump ejected the business community from the Republican coalition. So we're not having that kind of coherent discussion of economic matters that we normally would expect to see within the Republican coalition. The business community might come back, they might switch to the Democrats, they might become swing voters, don't know. We're not to the point where we can have that discussion nationally and coherently yet.